Book authors are imaginative architects inviting readers to embark on journeys of the mind and heart. Dedicating this segment to venture on such journeys in our Journey podcast with your host, Smitha Gunturi. Hello, everybody. I have Narwhal Smith with me today. He is an author of the book, A Christ-Centered Healing of Trauma, Healing a Broken Heart. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Please tell us, why did you write this book and what is your story behind it?
Well, I was a police officer for over 26 years, and I saw so many horrible things. And not that I'm special, all the police officers, they see these horrible things every day. And I really didn't realize how it was affecting me emotionally. And so eventually, after about 10 years, I started to develop these emotional issues like depression and anxiety, things like that. And I was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And then around my 13th or 14th year, I got diagnosed with a debilitating disease called, it was a mixture of neuropathy and another muscle disease called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, which is an atrophy of the muscles in the extremities. And I started going through a bunch of surgeries. I had about 30 surgeries in 10 years. And I knew I was losing my career because of this. And if you know anything about first responders, their career is their identity. So it was very difficult for me to handle. And through all these 10 surgeries, they kept giving me more and more Percocet and Vicodin and other painkillers. And I really did not use them for the pain. I found that they numbed my emotions, which allowed me to get through the day. And then after a couple of years, I realized that I think I was addicted to them. And the reason why I'm getting to all this is that and then my daughter got very ill. I was diagnosed with some liver tumors, and that was my baby girl. You know, she's my youngest, and that was something that I never really recovered from. I tried to commit suicide twice, and all these were just poor coping skills, right? I didn't know how to deal with things because I didn't know God. You know, I grew up in a Christian family, but you know, I really didn't know anything about God. And so I dealt with the adversities in the only way that I knew how was to, you know, just cope by yourself. And the pills helped me. I made a bunch of mistakes. My decision making was so poor that I ended up stealing some drugs, and I ended up getting a prison sentence in federal prison. And it was at that time I realized that, wow, you know, these emotional issues really negatively affected my life and all those around me. And so when I got to prison, I realized that I needed to do something. And through a series of events, it's a long story. I detail it all out in my book, but people introduced me to God. And usually it's only at your lowest point in life where you look up and seek out the help. And that's basically what happened. Yeah. So when I got to prison, it was a federal prison in Fort Worth, Texas, and they had a chapel there, and they had a seminary come in teaching classes, and God kind of led me there, and I go, okay, I think I see what you're leading me to do. So I started taking classes, and I ended up getting a master's degree in theology and counseling, and then I went on to get a doctorate degree in Christian counseling. And it was through these schools that I saw God's principles of healing laid out in the Bible. And then I thought, okay, just let me try them, because I was still going at that time through secular counseling. So even in prison, I every week I went to a psychologist in there, and it was about 3 years, and there was really no healing. I felt better. You know, secular psychologists do have a great role here, in the fact that they can teach you great coping skills, and you have someone to talk it out with. But in my case, there was no healing, and that's what I wanted, was healing. So I met another officer that got into trouble from Los Angeles Police Department, and we started really breaking down the Bible on, you know, how and what God says about this. And once we started doing that, I realized that I was starting to get healed. I was starting to feel a lot better. And then it was through this process that in about, I don't know, 6 months or so, I was healed of all my PTSD symptoms. So I have not had a PTSD symptom now for 14 years. It's been incredible. And then I skipped over the part where God actually healed my daughter also, which was the last step in believing that there is a true living God. And what happened there real quick is when she got diagnosed with liver tumors. We started praying because I had just learned how to pray. My pastor of my church had the congregation pray, and we did a biopsy. And then in the biopsy, they found no liver tumors, and the doctors couldn't explain it. And so that's when I finally knew in my heart that there is a true God. And so after that's when I went to prison. So I kind of left out something there. So I'm sorry, out of order. But that's how I came to write it, right? Because then when I realized my healing, I realized, wow, I think anybody could do this as long as they believe and have faith in God. And that was my goal, was to help first responders, because, firemen, nurses, doctors, all these people, they see this trauma every day. But then when I was in prison, I spoke to so many inmates that told me about their life stories that I could see that almost everyone is broken, right? And if you haven't been broken yet, I truly believe in my heart that everybody is going to have a life-changing or overwhelming life event sometime in their lives. And that's why I wrote the book and put it out there.
What do you think I will learn when I read this book?
Well, first thing you'll learn is, see when I came to the Lord, I knew nothing about him. So in the first chapter is I tell my story. The second chapter is we talk about PTSD, what it is, how it affects our bodies, how it affects us spiritually. And then I go into a short Bible study. So in other words, we talk about who God is, who he sees us as, and then Jesus's healing ministry. So we lay out in the book why we should believe that we are healed, and all the biblical principles and all the obstacles that go against our healing. It's all laid out in their Bible. And then further on in the book, we go into emotions, what role our emotions play, using our emotions for the right way, using them the wrong way, and go on to prayer and walking in the Holy Spirit. So it's a thick book, and that's my biggest complaint, or that's people's biggest complaint, is that it's so thick. But I wanted to put every resource in this book for healing, right? And it lays out the steps. We talk about journaling, we talk about how to keep by going to church and by being communal with other Christians, how that kind of keeps you in a healing type of position, because you want to be close to God, you want to be in God's will constantly. So, and when we sin, that's when we get out of his will and we get out of his blessing. So it kind of lays all that out for a layman. I mean, I explain everything in something that I would understand, because it took me a long time to understand the Bible. It's hard to read the Bible and understand it.
People translate it in whatever the way they want. When they read something, whether it is the true thing or not, nobody knows, of course. I agree with that. But they interpret it in whatever the way that they want it to, and then say, like, yeah, this is what the God word is.
Yeah, any of the scripture in there can be taken out of context. And so I recommend, I write this in the book too, is don't believe just anybody, even pastors. Pastors a lot of times will read into it or take passages out of context. Read it, pray on it, and feel what God wants you to take out of it. The Bible is written for us, and and when we read it, it gives us a message, right? And it's important that we don't read it in an academic way. We read it as a heart. So what I recommend in the book is to read one chapter, which is usually less than a page. Read it, then read it over again, so you haven't missed nothing. And then before you move on, say, well, God, what are you trying to tell me? How does this affect my life? And a lot of times it won't, but sometimes you'll get this just feeling that, wow, I didn't know that, and I could use that in my life, and it's life-changing sometimes.
Absolutely. What is the healing process for you, like, and what are the methods or like anything that you follow to heal yourself?
Oh, well, the first thing was to ask for help. When you're in the military and a first responder, and I'm talking about nurses, doctors, paramedics, firemen, cops, you don't ask for help, right? And this is in a lot of cultures also. A lot of cultures really discourage men from being honest and open, exposing their feelings, and especially asking for help, because they'll say, well, you're not a macho man if you ask for help, right? So that's the first thing. And that's what I did. And that's what kept me oppressed for so long, was just being afraid to look weak. And that's wrong. We need to open up. We need to expose our trauma to the air. And that's the first step for healing. And when I learned I had to open up and talk about it, that's when things started to open up. And then journaling was awesome for me, when I would journal out some of the things that I've seen and some of the things that I experienced. I mean, just some horrific things that I just kept inside. And I held a lot of resentment on the perpetrator, even though, I had no relationship to those people. Just by being there, witnessing it, and being forced to deal with their mistakes or their violent actions, really caused me a deep inner hatred of people, and a resentment towards a lot of people that have hurt others. And I had to clear all that up. So we have to go through and identify those people. We have to forgive them. And that doesn't mean going to them and saying, I forgive you. It just means releasing it. We're always carrying all this on our shoulders, that, so-and-so when I was in high school did this to me, and I wish them all this bad things to them. But, they're not being affected. It's only us. They probably don't even remember us anymore. If, we remember stuff from high school, but we for some reason, humans just like to carry it around. And once we start just releasing, it's like a backpack full of rocks. Each rock is a wound, right? So once we forgive those people for what they did, and I'm including parents, a lot of times parents do the biggest wounding of the children. But in the Bible, it says, you must honor your parents. Now, that doesn't mean all the parents deserve to be honored, right? But what it means basically is just acknowledge that they gave you life, and you don't have to be friends with them. You don't have to go to Christmas dinner with them, but at least you just have to release them from the ill will that you harbor against them. Because the Bible actually says, that respect your parents or things will not go well with you. I mean, it actually says that. So that's that important. So once you start forgiving people, once you start cleansing yourself spiritually, that's when the healing begins.
You wrote in your book introduction saying stigma of mental health issues and seeking for help. That is what your book is mainly focused on. In current society, mental health is becoming like a big topic. Up until recent, nobody really cared about what mental health is or anything. So when you're mentioning like the stigma of mental health, what do you exactly mean by that?
Well, it's the same thing what I just said. It's you know that you're not well. You know that emotionally you're not well. And we don't ask for help because we don't want to seem like people will call us nuts or crazy. If I'm having anxiety or I'm having a panic attack, a lot of times we'll just suppress that all down and hide in our room, and maybe just go under the covers in the fetal position. But that's not going to cure anything, right? And once we put out there, and that's one of the biggest things that I'm trying to do, is to get people to realize that you're not crazy if you're just going through some issues. A lot of the stuff, not everything, but a lot of the stuff is just spiritual, right? We just need to get right with ourselves. In other words, like I said, forgive others, ask for forgiveness where necessary, do the right thing because maybe you haven't and you feel guilty, and there's some guilt in there, and all these things. But if we start putting out there, like, I live near San Francisco, and I'm sure San Francisco is a huge problem with homeless and fentanyl addicts. Majority of these people, I believe, are going to come in or be diagnosed with mental illness or dual diagnosis, right? The drug addiction and a mental health issue. and since I don't know how many years has it been, 50 years ago, the government pretty much shut down all the mental institutions. So this is one of our biggest problems is, and I know from being a cop that you can't just arrest a homeless person. And even if he's using drugs, so you arrest him for drugs. What are you going to do? You put him in the jail. He's going to be clean for 2 or 3 days. But then society has no room for these, let's say nonviolent people, because most of them are really nonviolent. Then what happens? They kick them out and write it back on the street. There's no addiction process. There's no let's take you to a recovery program, anything like that, because the money's not there. And not that we need to throw huge amounts of money at this, but it's a multi-pronged approach, right? It's just not a police problem. It's a societal issue that really needs to be debated to see how far we'll go, because a lot of people just will not take their meds, and when they refuse to take their meds, what do? And this is where a lot of the police shootings and killings come in, is a lot of the people have mental problems and they almost want to die. I mean, I tried to commit suicide twice, so I understand what they're going through, but the police aren't to blame. The police only have so many tools, and the criminal justice system was created for criminals, not for homeless, drug addicts, or mentally ill people. And so it bums me out when I see San Francisco get a bad rap, and for some reasons they deserve it, but others it's a societal issue. It's just not San Francisco. It's all over the country and all over the world.
Being in service for 26 years, again, going to prison, that's like from this corner to that corner. How did you actually deal with it, being in power and completely powerless?
Oh my gosh, it was very, very stressful. I mean, I was out on bail for 2 years, so I had 2 years to think about it and to really stress about it. So when I went in, I basically lied. And I said I was a fireman. I didn't want to tell anybody that I was a cop, so I said I was a fireman. But after about 6 months or 7 months in, I really felt God talking to me, saying, listen, if you want to have any kind of a testimony, if you want to have any kind of credibility, you're just going to have to tell the truth. And luckily, I had some people from the church that had been in prisons before, and they kind of gave me a lot of tips, like, don't play with gangs, as soon as you get there. So the first thing you just arrive, that's the first thing they ask you, which gang do you hang out with? And I basically said, no, I'm a Christian, and I'm just going to I'm neutral. I'm going to spend my time in the chapel, and that's it. And they pretty much leave you alone. When they found out I was a cop, I had a few threats, but by that time, people kind of knew me and saw that I was helpful, and I was in the church, and I was actually helping some people with their law cases and stuff. So for me, it was not a hugely bad experience. There was some scary moments, but pretty much it was okay with me. But I truly believe that God was with me there.
Listening to your story are like the ups and downs. I'm pretty sure that you might have had like the confidence issues. Were you confident all the time to talk to people, or like to perform whatever you wanted to perform, or like first time when you are talking to somebody that you found God and you wanted to help them, and while you wanted to talk to them, do you have any kind of a step back, like, will they listen to me, or such self questions, like confidence issues?
Now or before my arrest?
Before.
Before my, oh my gosh, I don't like to admit this, but I was pretty much a narcissist. I mean, pretty much, I could talk in front of a group. I could take command. I mean, I achieved the rank of lieutenant, so I could be the boss, and I knew what I was doing. I felt I was a good cop until I wasn't, and that carries over now, I think, to what I'm trying to do in the ministry by talking to people and stuff. But now it's a little bit different, because there's a stigma of being a felon, right? So I had lots and lots of friends. Matter of fact, my only friends were police officers. But now that I'm home, none of those police officers will ever talk to me. They shy away from me. They won't stop by. They won't call. They won't do anything. It's only the retired guys that will really acknowledge me. So there is the shame and the guilt comes in. And to be honest, even though I write about it in the book, I still have issues with guilt and shame.
Do you regret anything in your life?
Regret?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, the decisions I made. So in my book, I show pictures, but I don't know if you can see this, but see my fingers are all bent up.
Yes.
That's part of the disease that was happening. So when I was 47, I'm 62 now, but when I was 47, these things started to happen. And I felt that my career was ending because of this disease. Being the macho tough cop that I thought I was, right, or I pretended to be, made it very difficult to seek help. I truly believe in my heart now that if I would have went to my bosses and said, hey, this is happening, I believe they probably would have let me run out my last couple of years until retirement at a desk. But you see, we don't think about that, right? Because it's not a job. Like people are a carpenter, or they work for the city or they work for the state. But a cop, a fireman, a doctor, a nurse, that's who you are. That's what you are, and there's nothing else, right? So I was afraid. So the decisions I made not to open up and not to say something is my biggest regret, because that's what led to the isolation. That's what led to the pills. And that's what led ultimately to me making some really terrible decisions in my life.
With all this, what is the biggest lesson that you have learned?
Open up, talk to people. If you're hurting, back in the early 2000s, when I was just starting to go through these medical issues and having these surgeries, my wife noticed. She said, there's something wrong. You really need to go talk to somebody, because she noticed that I was very depressed, and I basically said to her, hey, listen, I'm good. Believe me, this is just a little bump in the road. I'll be good tomorrow. But I wasn't, right? And it gets deeper and gets deeper. And then you start pushing the people away from you that are loving you. And then pretty soon that you're hurting those people that love you, because you don't want them to know what's going on in your life. See, so that all comes about on opening up and saying something. So when you're feeling depressed, I had nightmares that were so horrific, I was afraid to go to sleep. And I was taking Ambien for years just to go to sleep. At that time, I should have noticed. I should have said, hey, I can't deal with this on my own. I really need help. And I truly believe in my heart, too, that if I would have sought help back then, I would have never been in trouble. But if I'd never gotten in trouble, I would have never met God. I would have never been able to learn all these things. I'm an addiction counselor now also. I'm a chaplain and addiction counselor. I would never been in the role of helping people. I would have been a sour, grumpy ex-cop. That's what I would have been. So in my kids were sad when I had to leave, but we talked about it. And when I came home, they realized I was a much better person now than I ever was then, because I had so much anger and hatred in my heart. And now I'm open to love and stuff. So they even said that the 8.5 years that I was gone is worth it to make me a better person. So you give and take, right? God has a plan. God knew exactly what he was going to do. And so I would not, if right now God said, hey, I'll give you a redo, I wouldn't take it. I would do everything the same way. Yes, I regret it, but that's what's made me right now. And if there's people out there that want to look down on me and say, well, you've been to prison, you're a scumbag, that's going to be them, right? I mean, I'm doing my best to make amends for the things I've done by doing these different jobs and helping the church and helping the homeless and all that. So I know what I did. I'm trying to make amends for it, but you can only do so much, and I can't. I have no control over what other people say.
When you mentioned that you used to push people away without asking help or anything, who were your support system while you actually started your healing journey?
Those guys in prison. I mean, it's there was a friend of mine he was from he wasn't a friend. He was a guy I met in prison, but he was Los Angeles Police Department, and he got into some trouble with drugs too, because he ended up having to shoot in 2 separate incidents, shoot and kill 3 people, and they were all legitimate. I mean, these guys tried to rob him. He got shot twice during it and stuff, but he had learned a lot about the healing principles of the Bible. So he was my support system in there. And there was a couple other people. See, I don't want to say befriend, because I don't think you ever really make friends in prison, but people who support you and people that you support, even though they might have done some bad things. I think there's always redemption, right? As long as they're doing the right things to make amends. And that was, and his name is Ruben Palomares, and he changed my life. He taught me how to look at the Bible and read the Bible, but with the heart.
While going through this journey, or like turning yourself towards God, pretty sure you might have heard a lot of people advising you, like, yeah, you have to do this, you shouldn't be doing that. What is the best and worst advice that you have heard for yourself?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. What is the best I did? What?
Advice that somebody gave you.
Oh, the best advice? The best advice I ever got was to open your heart to the Lord. I mean,
And the worst?
yeah, again, I grew up my whole life in a Christian family, but we really only went to church maybe Easter every other year. And it's not my mom and dad's fault. I mean, it's just the way Americans are, right?
Oh.
And so I never learned what God was about. So when this pastor that I met through another divine kind of meeting thing, he wanted me to open my heart to him, and I did. It took a while, but as soon as my daughter was healed, it was like, bam, that's it. God is real. So that was the best advice that I'd taken on that.
What is the worst one?
The worst advice, you could do it yourself. Don't worry about it. I went to this one psychologist who, the difference between a Christian counselor and a secular counselor is that in secular therapy, the goal is to increase your self-worth, your self-confidence, right? But in Christian counseling, the idea is to focus on God. And then when you focus on God and you do the right thing, God changes you from the inside out. So he was kind of poo-pooing Christianity. Not that he was telling me not to, but he says, listen, you have to work on yourself, love yourself. And yes, that's important. You have to love yourself, but without loving in God and having a relationship from him, because we're separated from him, we can't really have that relationship with ourselves. And it took me a while to understand that. And when you look in the Bible, and this is all in the book too, when you see the scriptures that revolve around that, you can see that's what he wants us to do. God takes us through everything. He will be with us through our pain. He will be with us. And even though he allows us to go through difficult times, he will make those difficult times into something positive. It may not seem like it at the beginning. If you would have asked me, 4 or 5 years ago, well, what good is he doing in your life? I don't know yet, because yeah. But now I see his plan, right? I see that he allowed me to make the mistakes, and he's guiding me in the direction of doing this.
Since you talk much about God, what does love mean for you?
Well, I think there's a couple of different kind of loves. There's the love that God has for us, which is an unconditional love. And I think that's the same with like dogs and cats. They just love you no matter what. Children, they could have the worst parents in the world that beat them and don't give them food, and they leave them alone, but the children still love them unconditionally. And then there's the love of like a husband and wife, because you can't say that that's not unconditional, because a lot of times there are conditions, right? Well, I'll love you until you cheat on me, then you cheat on me, then I won't love you. See, so there's two kinds of love. Right now, I'm focusing on the relationship with my wife, because she was a wonderful person to this whole thing. She knew me years before my breakdown, so she knows who I really was, right? And during that 8.5 years, it was just miserable for her, and she stuck with me, and I'm so grateful. So now I'm focusing on that love, right? And that, to me, that means to treat her like she deserves to be treated. Don't do anything stupid, and just focus on her. But I think there's two kinds of love. That's just me, though.
What is success in your life?
Success in my life is reaching as many people I can to seek out help if they need it. And if they don't need it, which is awesome, be that person that others can seek out. Be that person that, hey, how are you doing today? Put your arm around, hug somebody, smile. Even if you don't know them, hold the door open for people. Just little things that show Jesus in us, right? Because I believe that if Christianity has such a bad name in a lot of circles, because everybody knows what Christians are against. Not many people know what Christians are for, right? And the churches do a real bad messaging. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad people in the church, just like the bad people everywhere, right? So it doesn't mean we have to give money. It doesn't mean we have to feed the homeless. It just means that we have to have a good heart. You see somebody on the street, hi, how you doing? A friend, call somebody you haven't talked to in a few weeks. Hey, haven't heard from you. How are you? Stuff like that. That's what Christianity is. It's love God and love your neighbor. And I was on the other side. I was thinking, oh, the church wants my money. They got all these rules. No, it's just loving each other. So I think that's the most important thing to do is if you need help, ask. And if you're doing great, that's awesome. But see if you could help others.
How do you practice gratitude?
Oh, every night. At work, we even do this. I work in a men's residential facility. Every night at dinner, we say gratitude. So we go around the table and everybody says what they're thankful for. I pray every morning and every evening, and I thank him for all the things that I believe he's done for me. And just verbalize. And again, not just verbalizing it, but putting those into action, right? So if someone does something good for you, do something good for somebody else, pass it on.
I want to thank you for your service that you have done, being in the service, and now the work that you are doing, being a God's person. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, and you can find me on all the socials at Smitha Gunturi and the show notes for any resources mentioned. See you next week. Take care.